velvet behind the mirror. Backstage, dust tastes like old sugar. It hangs in the beams of light with the glitter that refuses to leave the floorboards, settling over crates and velvet as if the last show never ended. I like arriving before anyone, adjusting the curtain weights, tapping the trapdoor hinge with my knuckle to listen for the tired spot, and rolling a coin over my fingers until it vanishes into my cuff. When the house is empty, the theater breathes. The ropes sigh against their pulleys, the ghost light hums, and somewhere a forgotten dove coos inside its travel crate like a strange little metronome, reminding me that magic, at its root, is managing panic. I've been an illusionist long enough to know that most deceptions aren't in the trick. They're in the hands that set it up, the voice that slows for the important words, the perfectly normal walk from point A to point B that persuades everyone there is no point C. My hands have calluses in places non-magicians don't have skin, along the base of the thumb muscle where wire meets flesh, the webs of my fingers polished smooth by cards, a pale crescent scar under my wrist from a mirror that didn't forgive me fast enough. I suppose I trust my hands more than I trust my heart. They only lie when I ask them. Mara liked that about me when we first met. She managed a late-night cabaret that called itself a theater to get the tax benefit. She wore suits cut like statements and tasted of mint and coral. After I closed my audition with a bullet catch that made an old man in the front row pray out loud, she found me backstage adjusting the false back of a trunk. "You only look honest on stage, Noah," she said, and then she kissed me. We made out against a coil of rope, both of us laughing into each other's mouths as I told her what that rope did, and she told me what she'd do with it later. The first month lived as though the lights never fully went down. She learned the pressure behind my elbow that makes me stop thinking. I learned the cadence of her heels on the catwalk, and the small, caught breath that meant we would not make it home before we were on each other. Everything in our life was cues and misdirection, ecstasy and exit strategies. After an opening night, we'd find the quiet seam in chaos, a shadow between the props where her hands would push my jacket off my shoulders, and my mouth would find the place under her ear that tastes faintly of salt and spray. We wrote our own show inside the bigger one, a series of vanishes and returns that somehow felt sincere, even if sincerity was rare in our trade. Deceptions don't break like glass, they shift. The first hairline change was an unfamiliar perfume clinging to my cape after a promo shoot, warm, ripe fig under a lacquered sweetness. Mara wore vetiver, tart and clean. Fig walked into a room before its owner did. A week later, I found a cufflink in the sawdust near the Metamorphosis trunk. Gold, heavy, the initial C in a font that liked itself. There was a text thread on her phone in a tone that was all ellipses and backstage half-promises. The name over it was Cashin, our booked mentalist for the summer. He did audience plants like a gardener and owned every room like he'd paid for the ceiling. When I asked, she didn't fumble. "We can't be Puritans inside a carnival," she said. She had changed her hair, and the blunt ends made her look both young and armed. "Desire runs around in a place like this. Either we fail or we write rules." "Whose rules?" I asked. "Ours," she said, and she pulled a marker from my pocket and wrote over my blueprint for a mirror box the bones of a treaty. "No one from the crew, no one in our bed. We say before, not after. We protect the work. We don't humiliate each other." She underlined that twice. "Do not humiliate," I read, and my mouth found its way to her collarbone because I understood that sentence in my body. "We don't make habits," she added almost gently. I signed an X with her marker. It bled into the paper like something poisoning a river. Rhea walked into the theater as if heat had followed her in from a kiln. She was there to fabricate the angled glass for a new Pepper's Ghost illusion I'd built out of stubbornness. and an old diagram in a book that smelled like a mayor's attic. She had the shoulders of someone who carries sheets of material wider than doors and hair the color of smoke when smoke thinks. Black flecks dotted her forearms like constellations you could read only if you'd worked late. She touched the glass as if it were an animal that might startle. "If you want the reflection to come up from the floor," she murmured, crouching to measure a frame, "we'll have to steal some darkness from the audience." It had been a long time since a sentence made me want to kiss someone just for how it was constructed. "Can we afford the theft?" She smiled sideways. "Darkness always returns itself." Her shop was 2 blocks away in a brick light that had been a bakery sometime in the 1930s. The first time I stepped inside, the heat pushed against my chest and said, "What are you doing here?" She worked in that roar and shimmer with a calm that had its own frequencies. We talked about angles and glass density, reflective losses, the way audience eyes would fill the gap I needed them to fill because all eyes love to be useful. I found excuses to bring the frame by on afternoons when the theater didn't need me, and she found excuses to walk over and adjust something at my elbow, palm warm near my wrist as if my bones were a device she might tune. With her, I wasn't talking about rules. We weren't building a trap for appetite. We were making a window you could fall through without bruising. Desire arrived not like a thief but like a cat. It blinked slowly on a windowsill. When we finally touched for real, it was an inevitability I could have predicted with a pencil and a napkin. We were both careful because we both loved what our hands could do. I told Mara before my mouth touched Rhea, with intent. I'd promised, and I honored promises even when they lay like glass splinters in my bed. In the green room, while a singer warmed up scales through a wall, I said Rhea's name. Mara's face did a small, almost unkind thing, the way skin flinches when a flame gets too close. "Of course it's the girl with the glass," she said, half laughing, as if this were a joke, as if I'd chosen a metaphor to hurt her. "Be careful," she added. "The mirror is always on." "Are you asking me to stop?" I asked. She looked at my hands, not my face. "I'm asking you to remember me inside whatever you do." The summer's big show had donors attached. We built nights around people with money, the kind who applaud rare wines and the word bespoke. The program promised that the audience would see how a miracle is made. We'd open the stage and let them look at our ropes, our ghost light, the metal edges under velvet. They would feel included in secrets without knowing any. Cashin's name was on the poster, so was mine. So was Mara's in a smaller font, which she noticed and did not comment on. Rhea was not on any poster. Her work was supposed to be invisible by design. Dress rehearsal afternoon, we ran the metamorphosis trunk until my breath tasted like chalk. Cashin breezed in late with a new cufflink at his wrist and an assistant whose eyelashes seemed unionized. He shook my hand with both of his and called me brother. He and Mara looked at each other too long and I turned away. I checked the trunk latch, even though I knew it would hold. I bent to adjust the velvet and inhaled that fig. Anger is a cheap special effect, loud, bright, and it burns the performer if you do know where to hold the match. I put it down. I lifted the trapdoor. I closed it again. I kept moving. Rhea came through the side door, hair damp from fog, a crate balanced on her shoulder as if it were nothing. She had brought a backup panel, insurance against fate. She watched me run the trick once and then stepped to my side, too close for safety. Her fingers landed on my forearm and stayed. "Don't make tonight about punishment," she said low. "You think I'm going to use the trunk as a courtroom." "You're a magician," she said. "Of course you're tempted, but illusions don't enjoy revenge. They prefer music." We were who we were, and the body likes to be who it is. I leaned into her until I could smell the heat on her neck, something like citrus hiding under smoke. The kiss was not theatrical. It wasn't ravenous. It felt like stepping through a door I had built and tested with math. When we separated, the room looked a degree kinder. "Later," she said. "Make them forget themselves first." They did mostly. The donors glittered. Champagne made speeches for people who prefer not to. I found the rhythm that saves me when the room wants more than I've got, and card by card, ring by ring, coin by vanishing coin, I coaxed the crowd toward a quiet I could believe in. Cashin swam in the murmur like a fish that thinks water is a personal invention. He made a woman cry with a word she swore he couldn't have known. He kissed Mara's knuckles on stage and handed her a bouquet he'd pretended she'd thought of herself. The applause had the sound of tips. When it was time for the trunk, I called Mara from the wings. She could have refused, she didn't. The trick is simple if you dismantle it on paper. She goes in, I lock it, we trade places through the hidden door behind the mirror under cover of a 3 count and a curtain that flirts with the floorboards. What makes it magic is pressure and nerve. When I spun the lock, I felt the old trust in my palm. I rapped twice on the lid, their cue, not mine. On the fourth beat we had switched. I burst out into light. I let the audience clap for our timing. I brought Mara forward. I raised our joined hands like a treaty. Backstage, she squeezed my fingers. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For not turning the trunk into a confession booth." "I'm not God," I said, "and even if I were, I'm not sure I deserve it." She looked like a woman who had cut her hair and survived the consequences. "We'll talk," she said. "Not tonight." "Not tonight," I agreed. The last effect was the mirror. Rhea's glass worked like a spell that respected the audience more than it despised them. The ghost shimmered, walking up from our feet as if the future had decided to attend. People reached toward it like children reaching for a firefly. I watched them watch the impossible, always my favorite part. When the curtain fell, my heart was a steady muscle, for once not tricking me. After the donors left their empties and promises of emails, after Cashin kissed both my cheeks and pivoted toward whatever chandelier wanted him next, after the crew carried the doves to their night home, Rhea waited by the loading dock. She leaned against a column that had seen more shows than I would hear about. In the yellow light, her shoulder looked like a place you could put your head. I did. I put my head there and closed my eyes and breath like a person not rehearsing. Some kisses become rooms. You walk in and close the door. That night we didn't tumble or tear. We unbuttoned each other the way you unwrap a gift you feel almost shy to accept. She tasted of skin after heat, of citrus and sleep. When her palm slid down my chest, I forgot every false bottom I've ever built. I wanted to be a single surface and tell the truth. On the crate, on the bench, against the cool glass she'd brought into being, we made a language with our hands. When I worried about what might be seen, she brushed her mouth against my worry and made it change shape. Pale light from the alley drew new shadows on our shoulders. I learned the pressure behind her knee that made her laugh and go quiet. I learned that she liked when I held her wrists not to restrain but to ask. We gave each other no speeches about what we were doing. We didn't insult it with defense. When she whispered my name, it sounded like something an audience might applaud because it was true. We stayed overdressed enough that the theater remained a workplace. When I say we were careful, I don't mean restrained. I mean we honored the scaffolding that holds joy, the structure you don't kick just because your feet are strong. I wiped my fingerprints off the glass when we were done, and she grinned against my shoulder as if that were the most erotic kindness she could imagine. Mara and I spoke the next afternoon. We didn't summon lawyers or throw chairs across rehearsal rooms. She came to my apartment where our bed looked like a clear table set for a trick no one would attempt tonight. She sat, folded her legs under herself, and told me the truth in a tone written for hearing tests and confessions. She had slept with Cashin. She had liked the convenience of being adored by someone who was adoring everything. Not because you weren't enough, she said. Because I have a hole somewhere that wants applause. You chose a man who travels with a hole-drilling kit, I said, and she laughed. One clean burst that made us both love each other for a second. Do you love her? She asked, and she meant Rhea, and the word love didn't crack the furniture. I don't know yet, I said. I know I like who I am around her. I know my hands feel like telling the truth. She nodded. I don't know how to be married to that. Then don't be, I said, and my voice was soft. Be what you can be without making a stage out of us. We divided the objects with kindness. She took the suits and the coffee table. I took the old posters and the prop swords. She kept the mint that had learned our sink. I kept the coin I'd rolled across my knuckles the night she first kissed me. She moved her perfume to a shelf I would not touch. We didn't make a show out of it. I've made enough to know the price of curtain calls. Rhea did not move in. She unfurled herself into my nights the way a new effect settles into a show, quiet at first, then essential. We worked together on a cabinet whose doors were more truthful than they looked. On weekends she taught me the rhythm of glass. Heat, patience, surrender, the thrum of a substance that wants to be a wave before it becomes a window. Sometimes we made out on her shop floor while the kilns cooled and the neighborhood rats made their rounds, her fingers slipping under my shirt with a purpose that had nothing to do with punishment. Sometimes we just drank tea and swore at the news. A teenager with the posture of a question mark brought me a deck of cards one afternoon, bent and damp from anxious pockets. Teach me one thing, he said, brave enough to pretend it was a general request. I showed him a control even older than my hands, how to slide a chosen card to where you'll need it later without looking like you've done anything at all. When he tried and failed and tried again and almost got it, he looked up at me with a pride I recognized. It's not about speed, I told him. It's about where you put your want. If you walk by the theater late, the ghost light will still be on. I'll be there sometimes, no audience, tapping the hinge, rolling a coin for a room that knows exactly what it's worth. I turn the lights off in an order that reassures the rope. First the work lamps, then the balcony sconces, then the dimmer over the pit. The house likes a routine. I lock the stage door and kiss Rhea under the alley's single star. We go home, not to a sanctified bed or a map with rules drawn in red, but to a room where our hands know what they're allowed to say. In the morning, my cape will carry the smell of smoke and her skin. It is too honest to pass for misdirection. I am still an illusionist. I still hide the coin. The glass still obeys me like an accomplice who respects boundaries. But the best trick I survive now is a simple one. I make myself appear in my own life and remain there when the applause fades. If there's betrayal in the room, it doesn't own the stage. And if there's velvet behind a mirror, it's not to muffle a scream. It's to invite a mouth to tell a truth, low and close, in the only language a body trusts.